All right, we seem to have a number of guests joining us. Well, good day, everyone, and welcome to the second of a four-part webinar series that explores the Swiss UAV ecosystem and its many facets. The objective of this webinar series is to outline how your company can participate in Switzerland's technological and regulatory march towards the future. Each webinar in this series provides in-depth perspectives and real-world cases. Today's session will provide you with in-depth knowledge of how companies can collaborate with the world's leading drone labs in Switzerland, and of course, how they can take off from the Swiss airfield. My name is Lukas Sieber, and I will be moderating today's presentation. This webinar series has been co-developed by my organization, the Greater Zurich Area, and the organization known as Invest Western Switzerland, also known as Greater Geneva Bern Area. My colleague with Invest Western Switzerland, Matt Julian, who is also on this call and whom you might know from the first session, will be moderating the next webinar taking place in about 10 days. What we do, Greater Zurich Area and Greater Geneva Bern Area in Western Switzerland is quite simple. We have common goals, and that can be phrased as our organization are here to act as a single source of free support and assistance to companies interested in exploring business expansion opportunities, scientific collaborations, and partnerships throughout Switzerland. Before we delve into the topic and into the content, let me do some housekeeping. I'd like to give you an overview of what you see on your screen. The webinar will be of about 1 hour in duration, 50 or so minutes dedicated to presentations by our panelists, and we will reserve about 10 minutes at the end of today's session for a Q&A. If you have a question, please submit them. Please submit it in the box to the right on your screen, and we'll do our best to answer the question during our session today. If you are unable to respond to your specific question, or if you would like to reach out to us directly, please do not hesitate to do so. We will share our email addresses throughout today's session. We will record today's webinar, and we will share the recording after today's session. You will also receive a follow-up email tomorrow, including the session today, and we of course also are going to YouTube today's content. Well, let me talk a little bit about the drone ecosystem of Switzerland. Switzerland has established itself as a leading location for innovation, testing, and deployment of UAV technologies in a highly regulated but open skies environment. Our regulatory authorities are working closely with industry and their counterparts around the world to develop tools and digital technologies that will ultimately lead to an integrated and safe airspace. Switzerland offers a unique opportunity for companies to innovate, test, refine, and ultimately deploy the technologies in the real world, enabling the collection of invaluable experience and data that can be directly applied to the broader commercial market. So now I'm pleased to introduce today's panelists. I will kick off with Professor Roland Siegwart. Dr. Siegwart is Professor for Autonomous Mobile Robots at ETH Zurich, founding co-director of the Technology Transfer Center Wies Zurich, and board member of multiple high-tech companies. He studied mechanical engineering at ETH Zurich, spent 10 years as professor at EPFL Lausanne, held visiting positions at Stanford University, NASA Ames Lab, and was vice president of ETH Zurich between 2010 and 2014. He is an IEEE Fellow and recipient of an IEEE RAS Pioneer Award and the IEEE RAS Innovate Technical Award. He's among the most cited scientists in robots worldwide, co-founder of more than half a dozen of spin-off companies, and a strong promoter of innovation and entrepreneurship in Switzerland. His interests are in the design, control, and navigation of flying, wheeled and walking robots operating in complex and highly dynamical environments. We very much look forward to the presentation of Roland, but before we give the floor to Professor Siegwart, let me introduce the other speakers as well. After Roland, we will have Mélanie Guittet speaking. She's co-founder and Chief Business Development Officer of Involi. Mélanie is an entrepreneur, co-founder, and as I said, Chief Business Development Officer of Involi, a Swiss high-tech company permitting the safe integration of drones into the airspace. Having an engineering background from EPFL, she has previous experience linking industries, academia, and authorities through large R&D projects in the field of IT, energy, and aviation. With a wide network in aviation and drones, she leads the development of the network, partnerships, and collaboration to expand Involi internationally. Very much looking forward to your presentation, Mélanie. Let me briefly introduce David. David Lanter is the co-founder of Tinamu Labs. Tinamu Labs is a spin-off from the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, Zurich, also known as ETH Zurich, as we know, which Tinamu Labs develops a turnkey solution for drone-based inspection automation. The system directly delivers real-time data insights to industrial asset owners. David holds a Master of Science in Management Technology from EPFL Lausanne. In previous roles, David gained consulting experience at renowned companies such as Deloitte and could sharpen his skills in venture capital. Consulting and VC provided him with the right tools to start an entrepreneurial path. At Tinamu Labs, David leads finance and operations. After David, we will have two speakers presenting the Swiss Drone Base Camp, a competence center that is part of the Switzerland Innovation Network. Located in the former Army Airport in the canton of Ticino, Switzerland's southernmost canton, it is home. The center offers full-fledged facilities and the unique indoor and outdoor testing opportunities. One of the speakers that will talk about the Swiss Drone Base Camp is Enzo Giannini. Enzo was promoted in economics and computer science at the University of Zurich, and then he assumed different management roles in the IT outsourcing and operations business within the financial industry, where he could gain a large experience working on many projects within international companies. With a strong passion for aviation, as a colonel of the Swiss Air Force and a former private pilot, he started in 2015 a new career in the aviation industry at RUAG. As general manager, propeller, aircraft, and UAV, he is also responsible for the maintenance of unmanned aerial systems and currently taking the opportunity given by the change of ownership of the Lodrino airbase with other partners, and he is creating a competence center for drones in the canton of Ticino. Together with Enzo, we will have Alessandro Giusti, head of robotics lab at IDSIA, talking a bit more about the role of the canton of Ticino in drones and robotics. Alessandro will be our last speaker. He holds a PhD in computer science from the University of Milano, and he has 15 years of research experience in robotics, applied machine learning, computer vision, and data visualization. He has been with the IDSIA, which is the Mole Institute for Artificial Intelligence in Ticino since 2009, where he is now a permanent senior researcher and head of the robotics lab, coordinating a team of about 10 researchers. He took part in a dozen projects in applied research, focusing on deep learning applications to flying and industrial robots. He is the author of more than 80 peer-reviewed publications in top conferences and journals and the recipient of several awards, most of which for innovative applications of deep learning in various fields. This gives me now the great opportunity to give the floor to Professor Dr. Roland Siegwart, one of the biggest names in drones. Roland, the floor is yours.
Welcome everyone to this webinar on drones. I have the pleasure to introduce this first presentation a little bit the landscape of drones in Switzerland and how it evolves. So I would like to start and go a little bit back when I was still at EPFL in Lausanne. It was just around 2004, where Dario Floriano and myself in our research lab started to do the different research in drones. And out of this, I think there was an initial spark to really develop drones competencies at universities in Switzerland. So the first example is here from Dario Floriano's lab, a very lightweight fixed wing airplane, which was equipped also with sensors which could avoid collisions with the walls you can see here with these black and white strips. So we, in my lab, then I was still at the EPFL in Lausanne, we started with a drone which is today known as these quadrotor drones. The idea was older than it was not invented by us, but obviously we were the first one which brought this drone up in the sky in a stable way. This was possible because we had all of a sudden the IMU sensors you need for drone stabilization and calculation power available. On our end, then later also at IDSIA Zurich, we started to push the next level of drones, which are much longer, have much longer flight durations. So our vision was to fly more than 24 hours, and we showed that this is in principle feasible with very small drones of about 2 to 3 meter wingspan, equipped with solar cells on the wing, and of course charging the batteries for the night flight. Another concept which was developed with a team of students in 2012 at ETH is a mix between somewhat a quadrotor and light and air vehicle, a balloon. And the nice property about these systems are that they're extremely safe. So you can see you can fly with these systems over people, and it will not automatically all of a sudden drop from the air. So in parallel, also in Zurich, Raf de Andrea started his research as a new professor at ETH Zurich, and most probably of you know this very fascinating flights he showed, where these quadrotor drones do very agile maneuvers, can balance sticks, can actually even hand over sticks, can build structures and so on. This is mainly was mainly pushing the agility and modeling and control of these drones. In this first step, these drones were not fully autonomous in the sense of they did have off-board sensing with cameras which were able to precisely track the drones. Our next step was actually to further push this question of how can we actually cover bigger space with drones, meaning higher flight time, but still being able to really have a simple way to get off the ground. This was a project which is now today the company Wingtra, which was initiated by a student team from ETH Zurich with the vision already at this moment, at the end of the bachelor, they want to build a startup company. So the fascinating concept here is that you can lift off like a helicopter by only having 2 propellers and 2 flaps. And once you are at a certain height, you just move over to a fixed wing mode. And by doing so, you are much more efficient. You have typically about a factor of 5 or even more, and you can cover much more ground. This was further developed as student projects and then ended up in a startup company which has today about 80 people. We actually also did some further development of our solar airplanes and showed that we can fly really multiple days. This ended up also in some missions we did with earth scientists in Greenland, where these solar airplanes can really fly out very far to do some measurements, mainly with cameras, from glaciers. Up to now, the earth scientists had to really go there with airplanes, which is very difficult. It's remote places. It's very difficult to bring the fuel up. And I think drones can do a very great job in this field for remote measurements at different places. So up to now, or up to recently, drones were typically used in free airspace. They can take pictures from the air, do some other inspections from the air. We were asking our question, can we actually build drones which don't have to be always separated from the infrastructure, but probably which can go into control with the environment? With the current drones, with, for example, multicopters, which have propellers which are all aligned in one plane, this is not possible because these systems are underactuated. And as soon as you go in contact with the environment, you risk that the controller becomes unstable and you cannot freely choose an interaction force and a movement. But by actually changing this multicopter, by having the propellers and the motors on the sticks which are with the center, which are turnable, you can see that all of a sudden you can actually move in pure rotation, pure translation, or then also generate forces in one direction and while moving in another direction. And this is especially shown in the second slide, where we demonstrate that with this omnidirectional quadrotor or multicopter, we can go and just put a pin to the helicopter, and then we can apply a force to this whiteboard and move laterally to the whiteboard and writing something on the whiteboard. Of course, this is not the future of how professors at ETH will write on the blackboard or whiteboard, but I think you can imagine that this has a lot of potential for other applications up in the air. So I would like to show this examples on the left side. You can see how a lot of inspections and repairs and interventions are done by humans on ropes. Sometimes it's scaffolds or cranes. This is dangerous and takes a lot of time. And in a lot of situations, if it's, for example, industrial setting, you have to shut down the whole plant, industrial plant, because you have humans next to a chimney and so on. Our vision is to have what you can see on the right side, that drones can do this. And to give you a glimpse that this is already in a good progress, that we can do this with drones, is this drone, which is now commercialized by Bolero, which has also at least a partial omnidirectionality. It can actually select the orientation and the movement independently. And this allows this drone to go in contact with the environment. For example, put a sensor which measures the thickness of the coating or the status of the corrosion on a structure. And by doing this, you can replace actually these dangerous jobs of people hanging on ropes, do it much faster and much more regularly because it's much easier to apply this. So a second thing with drones, which actually developed more or less in parallel with drones, is that drones have also to see. At one point, especially if you are flying close to infrastructures, you have to understand how you fly, where you fly. GPS will not be enough anymore. One development which was done, especially also in Switzerland, not only for drones, but also for virtual reality and augmented reality, is the tracking of features from one image to the other. If you can easily imagine, if you track features from one image to the other, and these are special algorithms which have been developed at different research labs, especially also at ETH Zurich, this allows you to actually recover the three-dimensional information of images taken from different places, and even more interesting for flying platforms, it allows you to estimate your motion and you localize you in the environment. If you apply this, you can do something like this, which is shown here as an example. This guy has to inspect some industrial setting every day. So he has to go to one station, take some measurements from valves and so on. At one point, he decides to take his smartphone with him or tablet, and the tablet is doing this motion estimation using this feature, and then you build up a map based on these features, which are elements which stick out in the image, and you actually calculate the motion the whole tablet did. Now you can very easily push this on a flying platform, because the flying platform has also a camera. This camera uses exactly the same features to localize itself. So in a simple way, in a teach and repeat, you can actually do this transfer of navigation from a human, which moves through the environment, to a flying platform. Now, if a flying platform would like to explore the environment and not just follow what the human did, you have to have more. You have to have a dense, so as we call it, reconstruction of the environment. And this is not so easy. On flying platforms, you would like to have very light sensors, so laser 3D sensors doesn't work typically on small drones. But with the appropriate new development from universities, you can actually build up a 3D map on the fly of the environment. This is a demonstration of a flying platform equipped only with a camera and the IU, of course, for stabilization, that on the right side on the lower part, you can see how the system automatically builds up the map. And then, of course, you can have a planner which automatically finds the best and most appropriate way to go along this forest without colliding with the environment. So the goal or the task of this robot was only to fly just 100 meters forward without knowing anything. And it did all the calculation on board to do really this, fulfill this task. This is still to be fully commercialized or industrialized, but this is state of the art, what we can do today with drones, and this opens a lot of new possibilities. I would like to end with some overview. Of course, we already have heard, especially the two technical universities in Lausanne and Zurich are the key developer and research units developing these new technology. On one side, it's robot design, but on the other side, it's also all the elements which are required for perception and navigation. We have also a couple of joint networks where we have a lot of collaboration, like, for example, the National Center of Competence in Robotics, which join us also together with SUBSI, which we will also hear today. And we have also a Center of Competence in Digital Fabrication, where we actually trying to use drones to replace in some situation in construction scaffolding. Because scaffolding can be sometimes very difficult, and there is a vision, which is probably still a crazy vision, to use drones instead of cranes and scaffolds. This very strong research, which started about less than 20 years ago, brought out a lot of spin-out companies. It's more than a dozen companies. I think if you could count all the number of people already now, new jobs generated by this company, it's probably close to 1,000 jobs, and it's still a very fast-growing field. And I'm expecting much more in the future. So quickly at the last point, take-home message. In the last 2 decades, drone technology has evolved from research labs to a fast-growing market. Drones are everywhere, but there is still a lot of potential to use them probably in a more professional way for different applications. Thanks to the pioneering work at the universities and all these young people which have been involved in the research, I think we can say Switzerland has become the home of drones. There is still new technologies which are under development. For example, as mentioned before, 3D reconstruction and autonomous flight in dense environments, so you can fly also indoor and in very dense environment, is still on research side, but also needs some way to industrialize it. Physical interaction, I think this is the next step for drones, where you can actually extend the field of applications. Onboard sense and avoid to avoid collisions with other participants in the air traffic. And of course, the seamless integration on drones in the public airspace. You will also see some examples how startups from EPFL help on this end. With this, I hope I was able to give you a little glimpse how drones developed in the last less than 20 years in Switzerland, how Switzerland became really the home of drones, and also generated a lot of new jobs. And I'm excited to see all this development. I'm convinced that this will go even further. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Roland, for your insightful presentation. Should you have questions for Roland, please don't hesitate and add those questions to the panel to the right. The presentation of Roland you can download as well on the panel to the right. You can see we will also share those tomorrow through the follow-up email. Now it is a great pleasure to introduce, to give the floor to Mélanie Guittet, representing Involi, a startup that is integrating safely drones into the Swiss airspace. Mélanie, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Let me share my screen. Okay, perfect. So as I said, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a very nice transition with the last slide from before on the seamless integration of drones into the airspace, because we're going to discuss safely integrating drones into their traffic. And I hope that by showcasing what Involi is doing, the technology, I can also explain a little bit more how innovation and collaboration in Switzerland could help our company. So Involi stems from the fact that it is still today very difficult to safely share the sky. There is a high collision risk between drones, helicopter, aircraft, etc. in the sky, and this becomes even more complicated if we are talking about beyond visual line of sight drone application. And as of today, there is no end-to-end solution for complete flight awareness. And the consequence of that is that we cannot have scalable commercial drone application. Usually those are very small scale drone application, and I'm mostly talking about beyond visual line of sight. Also, there is no redundancy in air traffic information, and this is not aligned with aviation requirements. So what we say is most of the time drones are blind to air traffic, and without a complete flight awareness, many drones opportunities, especially BVLOS, are today impossible. So the solution, if we say that drones are blind to air traffic, at Involi we try to give them eyes, which means that we provide them with complete and unique air traffic data. And we really try to have some data that is accurate based on state-of-the-art technology that is gathered by our own network of sensors. And the goal is to provide unparalleled flight awareness in order to have the safest of the drone mission possible. And by providing this layer of safety and security in the sky, we hope to enable all the exciting commercial drone applications, such as beyond visual line of sight. And when I'm saying that drones are blind to air traffic, I'm referring to this picture of this air traffic awareness. Everything that you see in orange, usually it is a blind spot for air traffic awareness. This is the image where the expression "to fly under the radar" comes from. Everything that is in orange, usually we have no idea about if there is a helicopter, an aircraft, or a drone flying. So we complete the existing air traffic picture that is provided usually by radars by installing on the ground a network of Involi sensors on top of existing infrastructure. And I'm mentioning this because usually it is rooftops, telecommunication antennas, and the goal of that is to gather and detect all the air traffic around. In more details with regard to the technology, we have first the hardware part, and mostly these are the air traffic receiver that you see here on the picture that are installed on the ground as a network. So multiple sensors that cover a designated area and act as a communication network. They are deployed onto existing infrastructure, such as telecom, rooftop, railways, wind turbines, etc. And there is a second part of our technology that is around software. And I specifically mention this because a lot of the innovation that we are discussing today and that is at the heart of this presentation is the innovation with regard to processing and algorithm. So all the data that is captured and gathered by the air traffic receiver is centralized onto a server that runs all the computer processing and the interesting algorithm that will be further displayed onto a web interface. And here, and especially on the software side, I mentioned some of our innovation and collaboration partners. So really just to name a few, we have, of course, the research institutes such as the PFL. We have Swiss companies such as Swisscom, Skyguide, or the Swiss Post, airports such as the Geneva airports or the Buax airport. And on the other side, we also have a lot of startup support. And here I'm just mentioning a few of those foundation companies, entities, or government bodies that have helped us to grow as a startup. And the consequence of that is that we could really reach internationally thanks to all these supports, all those collaboration, all the demonstration that we did in Switzerland. Now, I would like to give you some use case about a technology like ours, because everyone understands that it makes sense to safely share the sky with the rest of the air traffic, but sometimes just a few use cases help a lot. So the goal is really to safely coordinate every type of flying object. And one of the most up-to-date, let's say, use case is to provide safe medical drone deliveries between hospitals. You may have a drone transporting blood, organs, or whatever, COVID-19 tests, and the drone needs to be aware of a helicopter that may be randomly coming or going to the helipad. So it needs to know and anticipate the trajectory of the helicopter in order to avoid it. Another interesting use case would be to coordinate a lot of different types of flying objects. I say here in case of a fire, because you would have the drone that would be detecting the fires, mapping the extent of the damage, but then you need to have also a real the picture of the sky thanks to the helicopter, the water bomber that needs to extinguish the fire, etc. And when I said we were extending internationally, it's really in just a few years, we have interested quite a lot of countries worldwide. And this is really thanks to this Home of Drone program that is really, that we can showcase internationally. We're a member of the Swiss U-Space implementation. That is an initiative that is now seen very positively by a lot of countries internationally, and our system, the Involi system, is now deployed over the whole country, and we are powering this nationwide vision of the sky and the safe integration of drones into the air traffic in Switzerland. So I hope I could showcase a little bit how Switzerland really helped us developing our innovation, how the collaboration that we had in Switzerland and the support we could leverage from the country really helped us targeting internationally other countries. And I would be happy to answer other questions you may have at the end of the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mélanie. Highly interesting, and I'm sure we will have some questions for you at the end of today's session. However, right now I would like to give the floor to David Lanter, co-founder of Tinamu Labs, based in Zurich. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Lukas. And it's great that the early stage startup also can give its opinion about the Swiss drone startup ecosystem. So we at Tinamu Lab, we automate monitoring workflows inside of buildings using drones. So one of our first customers, the Swiss energy producer Axpo, has to monitor the inside of water dams on a weekly basis. Therefore, they send a human operator to the remote location. He walks through the entire facility, takes measurements, travels back to the headquarters, creates a manual report, and then decide upon next steps. As you can see, this procedure is very time consuming, it's expensive, sometimes it can be dangerous, and it can be generalized across many industries, such as conveyor belt inspection, inventory counting, power plant inspection, etc. We at Tinamu Labs, we automate such workflows by providing a drone-based analytic platform. So instead of sending a human operator to the remote location, a user in front of the computer triggers a drone that is placed in the remote infrastructure. The drone takes off, collects data, sends the data to the cloud where it is processed, and then the real-time insights are delivered back to the user in front of the computer. We at Tinamu Labs, we create the software building blocks for this kind of solution, meaning the interface, the analytic software, and the drone navigation. However, and this is very important, we do not manufacture our own drone hardware. For the drone hardware, we rely on partners such as the French company Parrot. Our technological innovation stands on 3 pillars. First, we have a drone navigation software called Virtual Rails. Virtual rails are basically local drone airspaces that cannot be left by the drone. Secondly, we have developed an indoor position system that gives the drone a centimeter accurate position even when no GPS is available. And as a third element, we have years of experience in viewpoint optimization, meaning we can guarantee that the drone always takes the same pictures exactly from the same angle. So as an early stage startup, we now have an automated indoor prototype ready that can be deployed for POCs. So our solution is drone agnostic and therefore can be used with a wide variety of drones. Sorry. Yes, exactly. The one you see here in the picture is a drone from Parrot, French manufacturer. So our solution also works in complete darkness, and it allows for the automatic inspection of points of interest such as cracks in the wall, or for reading of analog measuring devices. Using a drone as a flexible sensor is a very efficient way to overcome any kind of obstacle, for instance, like steep and slippery stairs in a dam. So we are a growing ETH spin-off with 7 full-time employees combining business, engineering, and entrepreneurial skills. We all had the opportunity to attend and to graduate from top-tier technical universities and to gain work experience at prestigious companies. So we have Toby, he developed the technology core of virtual rails during his PhD. We have Dani, who already successfully founded an ETH spin-off. Samuel, computer vision expert. Martin, with vast experience in GPS as he worked for a leading GPS company. Stefan, our machine learning expert, and Christoph, and specialist in user interface. We are VC backed and our investor base consists of 3 Swiss and US investors that focus on deep tech investments. So the Swiss ecosystem is outstanding when it comes to startup support and funding. There are many initiatives that strongly supported our positive development over the last 24 months. So first, the research at the Swiss University is world-class, and so is the graduating talent pool that is really capable of transforming complex ideas into products. That's one of the reasons why many highly innovative companies spawn out from ETH Zurich or EPFL Lausanne. And we have the chance to participate in different support programs. 2 with very high impact are either organized by ETH itself for its startups or by InnoSwiss, the Swiss Innovation Agency. As ETH is really pushing to bring novel technology to the market, they support their startups as we are one with marketing activities, with business trainings, or with industry access. On the other hand, also InnoSwiss is providing a certified coaching, but they also support startups and science-based projects with substantial funding and research workflows. For instance, we just conducted a preliminary study together with InnoSwiss. The third point, the Swiss-based drone system or drone startups are tightly connected, as many of them emerged from the same research labs. Having tight connections to other startups for us is a very efficient way to solve problems, and particularly to learn from later stage startups and to avoid making the same mistakes, if any mistakes have been done, of course. Then the investor base here in Switzerland is continuously growing, meaning VCs and large funds start to focus more and more on deep tech investments that have a very high R&D requirements. And another point is that Switzerland also remains a hotspot for large industrial and tech companies. So the close proximity for us is a very important part to establish a strong relationship to a potential partner that has power to bring new technology to a global market. That is also one of the reasons why we just joined the Microsoft Startup Program. And as a last point to mention is that the regulatory frameworks, as it already has been mentioned by the other speakers, is very progressive, and under these conditions, it's possible to quickly iterate and to test in all environments. So with my view on the Swiss ecosystem and how we as an early stage startup Tinamu Labs benefit from it, I close my presentation, and thanks a lot for your attention. And if you have any questions, I think the Q&A afterwards will be a great moment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. Highly interesting. And again, I'm sure we will receive questions. In fact, we already received some. I will tackle those after the presentations of Enzo and Alessandro. So now it is my pleasure to introduce two gentlemen representing the Swiss Drone Base Camp, a competence center that is part of the Switzerland Innovation Network, located in the beautiful canton of Ticino. The first speaker will be Enzo Giannini, president of the Association of Swiss Drone Base Camp in Lodrino. Enzo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I'm happy to be here with all of you talking about drone. In a little bit different to what my predecessor talk about. They talk about drones, about application of drones. I am more an enabler. I will present no drone. There will be my colleague Alessandro after that presenting what is going on in Ticino with the drone. So you will not see video about drones, but you see on the first slide, you see what I'm selling or what I'm presenting is a place, is a base camp. Because all this activity need a meeting point. They need, like you prepare a mission to go to the Everest, you need to have a point where you start testing your equipment, you can meet other specialists and so on. It is exactly what I'm doing, taking the opportunity of a former airbase, a military airbase that is taken over by the public, by the government, and is now at disposal for a certain type of activity. So we are putting there some play room to develop this innovation. So I explain very fast a couple of stuff. Where is that? So Lodrino is middle of nowhere. So, but it's good if you want to test drone. It's better being middle of nowhere, but it's not true. It's middle of Europe, as you see, is on the south part of Switzerland, where is silver sun is shining. And is about 1.5 hours from Milano and 1.5 hours of Zurich. So it's pretty in the center of the center. And this is very good if you want to just make some tests and so on. So it's about that. There you have some infrastructure, you have a runway, but you have airspace. That's the point. What we want to do there? So we don't want just to fly a drone. So it will be sure one of the arguments. We have there a couple of arguments. So one is a cluster about safety. That's for sure test, training, consulting, information, certification, networking in that area, but in a way focused to the safety. Another point is for sure the development there with Fab Lab or specialist facility, development kits and so on. So that's for startups, as David say, it's very important to have some help at the beginning. And if we proceed there, we have a community already, and that's a point of a meeting point where you meet other people. Like David say, that's very good if you work with other company doing the same or extending your application and so on. And this is the community needs certain point of exchange, and being there doing some tests may be a good point discussing. Another point is, as I say, coaching and help in proof of concept, consulting, networking, promotion. These all in order to explore new application, innovate, and enable, industrialize as in general as a facilitator of drone project. This is what we want to do. Why we do that? Not just because we like drones, but for a market need. There is a need for testing sites. So Zurich is not middle of nowhere, but it's a little bit difficult to test the drone middle of the city. And Mélanie, as I say, there are helicopters and other airplane around. So before going with their system, you need to do some tests. So you need that. We are independent, so we are not profit oriented. We are just promoting there, and we are not just a group of company, a club, or an association. We are just pushing that, offering that possibility. We have an airport. That's interesting. And more important is a dedicated airspace. We share with some airplane and helicopter, but we have some dedicated airspace. And we have already a good collaboration with authority and academy and industry. So we have already some contacts you will see. We have Alessandro will tell about some good qualified competencies and people are there in locally. And as I said before, we are in the center. So who are the company? If you look at that, the founding members, we have Istituto delle Molle. Alessandro will talk about that after that. And we have other company in between, also the company I'm working with. There are companies doing different kind of activity. These companies doing a smart city, for instance, and so on. But we have already a letter of interest that you see. We have a lot of academy, industrial, international, and institutional partner. And we are in contact with other. You've already seen some of these logos already in the presentation of our colleagues. How we will do that? Very, very good, just by renting facility, building up a training center that can help everybody, proposing and shared fab lab, renting airspace, the community management I talked about, events and communication is always good to having this exchange that I talk about also. IT, as you've seen before, David taught it, and Mélanie also, IT is very important. So offering service in that area. And very important is this kind of extended campus in between academy and the industry. So I close with the last news. We started as a separated initiative with the help of AGIR. This is a foundation for startup in Ticino. We are now part of the Switzerland Innovation Park Zurich. So we are in an even greater network, and we are proud of it. And we are keen to work with all together. So that's it. And I'm looking forward to having some interesting questions at the end of the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Enzo. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Alessandro Giusti, head of the robotics lab at IDSIA, one of the most influential AI labs in the world. Alessandro, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you see the presentation?
Perfect.
Okay, great. So I am from IDSIA. It's the Dallemal Institute for Artificial Intelligence. It's a research institute founded in 1988. We are in Ticino, and we have more or less 80 people working on different subfields of artificial intelligence. Today, I'm just going to give a quick overview of the activities we are doing related to aerial robotics. This is because we are one founding members. We are the main research partner for the Swiss drone base camp, as presented before by Enzo. That's us there. So in general, the Institute has quite a lot of expertise in working with AI. In 2016, we were nominated by NVIDIA as one of the pioneers in AI research, together with much larger institutions such as Stanford, Carnegie Mellon, MIT, and so on. So I'm going through some of our recent research related to robotics, and in particular related to drones. Most of this research is funded by the Swiss National Center of Competence in Robotics. And in particular, in this case, we are working with human-robot interaction. We developed through a PhD student here a system for pointing-based control of both drones and also robots, ground robots. And this has resulted in quite a lot of interesting papers and applications. Then we are also very active in the theme that Professor Siegwart mentioned before, that is allowing drones to perceive their environment, which is nowadays one of the big important topics to unlock the potential of robotics in general and drones in particular. So in this case, we are this is a work we are doing very recently. We have been doing in the last few months. We are working with these nano drones that are very small, less than 30 grams, and we are able to run very powerful convolutional neural networks on them using very little energy, completely on board. And this allows us to do state-of-the-art deep learning, including also some self-supervised learning approaches, meaning that these drones are able to improve their performance automatically by just being used. This is an example of what the drone is seeing, and the blue dots are indicating what the drone, what the neural network on the drone decides to do in the different times, whereas the green arrows show what the drone should do in that moment. And you see that they match quite well, which means that our system works pretty well. In order to, in this case, the application was for the drone to stay in front of people. Again, this is a task for human-robot interaction. And finally, one work we did in 2016 was about allowing drones to operate in forests. That is in contrast to what was shown before by Professor Siegwart. In this case, we are not doing any explicit 3D reconstruction of the environment, but we are using a system that is much closer to actual animal brains by just looking at the picture that is in front of the drone. We want to understand, we want to see where there is a trail, if there is a trail in the picture, and in that case, where it is heading. The problem is actually very well exemplified here. You can see with our eyes, with our brains that are very good at solving this type of problems, that there is a trail on the left in these two pictures on the left, that is on the center here, and on the right, here to the right. And in this work, we built large data set by placing 3 GoPro cameras on the head of one of our researchers and hiking for hours on the beautiful trails of Ticino, collecting very large data sets and training neural networks that are capable of recognizing which is the direction of the trail. As you can see here, this is just a phone held in my hand. You can see that the dot identifies the direction where the neural network thinks there is a trail in these pictures. So here I was walking, I was just checking that the neural network would actually detect the trail where it actually is. And then we moved to actually placing the neural network on the robot itself and letting the robot fly by itself, as you have seen in the beginning of the video. Now it actually stopped. Well, that's unfortunate, but that was anyway my last slide. I think that concludes my presentation. That the last slide was just thank you everybody. So that's the point. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alessandro. This has been highly interesting. And as I announced, we received a few questions. I suggest we start with a question that probably all of the speakers have an opinion. Thank you, Lea Feng. You were asking, so which product and service features should drone startups in Switzerland prioritize on to gain a competitive advantage on the market? Is it cost, is it quality, is it flexibility, design, quick delivery? I mean, we have so many good things to pick from in Switzerland. How can Swiss companies and startups achieve a competitive edge over its competitors outside of Switzerland in the US? Roland, Siegwart, how do you see companies and startups from Switzerland positioning themselves and getting a better competitive advantage?
Probably we can already have a look somewhat in the past what happened. In principle, Switzerland was at the origin of a lot of pioneering work for drones, but the mass market was then covered by DJI and other companies from China. And I think this is not the field where we are strong. On the other side, in parallel, we had this SenseFly, the first company which really was offering services for more professional use. And I think this is the field where we are strong, where there is really a deep understanding on the needs from the user's end. And it's not large volume, but still reasonably good volume, where you have to understand the whole tasks the robots have to do, they have to adapt this to different applications.
Thank you so much, Roland. Mélanie, where do you see the Swiss startups in drones getting a competitive advantage?
I think the competitive advantage that we have is in having such a ability for collaboration within Switzerland, this opportunity that we have to try many things, and we are supported every step of the way, not only by the network of industries, but also by the authorities and all the regulation bodies that help make it a reality. So we have something that is fairly unique in the sense that we are always discussing with the Confederation, with the state, with the ANSP, and they are also part of the solution. And I think this is a huge differentiator compared to a lot of other countries.
Thank you so much, Mélanie. David, anything to add on your end?
Actually not, was pretty well answered already, I would say. I think another point is just that we have it's time to market for the Swiss startups, right? As mentioned, the regulatory environment allows us to test and to iterate on solutions very quickly. I think it's really an aspect of time as well.
Enzo and Alessandro, how do you see the impact of the Swiss drone base camp in Ticino, and how can you help Swiss startups to get a competitive advantage?
So from my side, Ticino is just a place. So we are, as I said before in my presentation, we are connected. Mélanie said that the connection is very important. The international approach being here, we have a lot of very good competencies and skills. We have seen what Professor Siegwart presented, a lot of competencies. Alessandro on the south has also a lot of competencies. We have just to combine that, and David made in his presentation a very good list of points. We have the money, the authority. I presented the place. Alessandro presented some research, and Professor Siegwart has also presented a lot of activity going on, and this is what makes it interesting, the stuff. And we have to solve problem. We have to bring application that solve problem, because the drones need to be part of our world. So at the end, it's good to be a researcher, it's good to find stuff, but at the end, we have to solve problems. And that's for me the point.
I would also add maybe that Switzerland has access to a lot of talent coming out of like the best universities in the world. So that's, I think, a very good plus for companies.
Thank you so much. We are actually at the end of the session. However, I would like to squeeze in another question, as we have a lot of Americans listening and watching, talking about innovating and collaborating over here in the US. Usually people start talking about the FAA, about the regulators. So the Swiss FAA, we received a few questions on the Swiss FAA on FOCA. How supportive can FOCA be if you launch a new project, if you have a project at the university, or if you want to launch a project at the Swiss Drone Base Camp? It's an open question. Whoever wants to talk about experiences about the collaboration with FOCA, please, the floor is yours.
If nobody wants to start, I'm happy to start. I think this is probably also the beauty in a small country, and the connections are much more direct. So you can go and call, speak to them. I think at least up to now, I have them seen extremely supportive. I think there are in Europe a driving authority to bring drones in the public airspace, so that we can really use drones even better in the future for different applications. And I think this is also nicely shown. For example, Metronet is doing a lot of their first tests in Switzerland, in Ticino, in Zurich, but there is an American company. And the reason for this is that it's easier to interact and collaborate with the authorities.
I confirm what Professor said, Siegwart said. It's the contact with the people. We know the people. They are always participating at the events and so on. So we have this connection. It does make it really interesting. And as I say, we are a kind of drone valley instead of a Silicon Valley, where the authority, the industry, and so on are very interesting in that. And I hope that this will continue that dynamic and that energy.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Looking at the time, we have 12:03 East in the US, which means it's past 6 in Switzerland, probably time for an apéro. I would like to thank all the guests joining us, and I would particularly like to thank our speakers today. Thank you so much for sharing all your valuable insights. Again, we will share the presentations in the next few hours, as well as the presentation, as well as the recording of today's webinar. And this leaves me with announcing the next dates of the drone tour. The next one will take place on Monday, December 7. It will be on testing and refining drone projects. And the last session we will have on Monday, December 14, on how to partner and how to deploy products related to UAV in Switzerland. Again, thank you so much for being with us today and for learning on how to collaborate and innovate in the drone sector in Switzerland. Here you see the contacts of our colleagues at Invest in Western Switzerland, as well as our own contacts. Please don't hesitate to contact us should you have any questions. Thank you so much. Schönen Abend, have a good evening, and see you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.